Hi, and welcome to the Black Design Collective. My name is Lola Wusu, and we are here with Shaka King today. He is dubbed as the King of Chic by Fairchild Productions and the Daily News Record. Shaka King has been making a strong case for organic luxury since 1991. His upscale, casual, tailored luxury sportswear has been recognized both nationally and internationally by press publications like the New York Times, Vibe, Essence, E, and CNN, just to name a few of them. With the goal to exude stillness, peace in his designs, Shaka King is giving menswear a feeling. And I am excited to catch this feeling with you and all that it is that you are. Thank you for joining us with the Black Design Collective, Shaka King.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Lola.
I also realized there's a new Shaka King rising up in this in this landscape, who's like a junior to you, and it's funny because you both have very similar styles in that it feels the director and you. There's this feeling. There's something to your name, but thank you.
You know, I realized that, I realized when people started telling me they liked my movie months ago, I was like, movie? Then my sister called me saying, well, why you didn't tell me you directed a movie? I was like, trust me, if I had directed the movie, you would have known. But oddly enough, I remember the director's name some years ago. I have a friend who's a up and coming director there in LA, and he had mentioned it to me then, like, there's a director out here, his name is Shaka King, it's spelled just like your name. And I was like, okay, good. And here we are.
The name is reigning true. It's the same. The work is likewise. So it's good that you're sharing a name with somebody who's also just as prolific as you are. So where are you located?
Yes, I'm located in Mount Rainier, Maryland, which is basically 2 streets away from DC. So it's DC and then it's Mount Rainier, Maryland. So I'm in Mount Rainier, Maryland right now.
Love that. And where are you from? Is that where you're from originally?
No, originally I'm from Miami, Florida.
Miami, Florida. So when did you make that move from Miami to DC?
When I went, so there was some stops in between. Well, I eventually made the move from Miami to New York to go to college. And I graduated from Pratt Institute. And then I met my best friend the very first day that I moved there. His name was Ross, and he was from Washington, D.C. So within 4 or 5 months, I was in Washington, and I was constantly coming back and forth, coming either with him for break and so on and so on. But so from Pratt, living in New York and working in New York, I eventually moved from New York to DC, and I opened a boutique here in DC, in upper Northwest DC, and it was Shaka King, New York. I actually called it Shaka King, New York, and it was on Upton Street. So I was there for 9.5 years, and then I moved back to Miami to teach college. Wow. And then I went from there to Atlanta, and from Atlanta back to DC.
I love that. There's just so much richness in the story. So let's take it back. So when was your aha moment of fashion? Like, how did you get into the fashion industry to even become a designer?
My cousin, her name is Sharon. We call her BB. She had some fabric one week, because she used to sew. So she had some fabric on her bed one weekend. We were over there visiting. And then we went back, I want to say the next week or within a couple of weeks, we went back. No, it was the following week because we were going to the Orange Bowl Classic. And she came to the door and the fabric was on her in an outfit. And I was like, wasn't that on your bed? She was like, yeah, I made it. And I said, well, if you can make it, if you can do that, I can do that.
Love that.
My mother had a sewing machine at home already. And I just went and jumped on it and started sewing. And I realized I didn't know how to thread it or how to make it, make stitches rather. And so there was a woman who lived around the corner who was a homemaker, and she did clothing as well. And she showed me how to thread it and how to make a couple of stitches or how to control it. And then after that, I was on my own.
That is beautiful. That is a great story. I do love the fact that with design, it is like this unformed thing that you can form it into whatever it is that you want. So what was your first item that you created?
A pair, a pair of red and white, a pair of red and white gingham check pants, which had buttons for the fly because I didn't know how to sew in a zipper, nor did I know how to make buttonholes, but I could put a cut in them and stitch around it, so that's what I did. And I made them for like Spirit Week in
Oh,
high school.
fun. Oh, I
Because
wish I could
I
see you.
started making
Yeah.
clothes. I started making clothing when I was around probably in the 9th grade. So I guess that might have been 14 or 15. Not quite sure,
Wow.
something like that.
And for you
Yeah.
to just decide like, okay, I'm going to start making clothing and start wearing them to school. That is amazing. That is a feat.
Well, the thing was, once I knew, well, once I saw what she did and I said I could do it, that
Mhm.
was the beginning. But then what I was able to draw from was just actually going to the fabric stores and looking through the fabric books and pointing out the things I knew in my head I could make. Because I never really bought a pattern to try to use the sheet, the guide sheet. I always bought a pattern just for the pattern pieces. And
Mm,
then I sewed it together myself. So I did the sewing in my head was, in my mind, I was like, okay, this goes with this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. And
right.
that's how I would sew it. I didn't know you had to necessarily make the sleeve first and then put it on. So I might would look at the sheet and see that the whole sleeve was together before they sewed it in. And I would
Okay.
do that. And then I would improvise because I had my ideas of how the sleeve should look anyway, which was different from the pattern. In that maybe it had folds or it had tucks or it was half that, or maybe I want to slice a piece of color in the middle of it. It all just depends, because I also worked with scraps of fabric when I first started sewing. They were cheaper in the fabric stores. The ends that were the damaged goods and the end remnant pieces and stuff, that's all I ever bought. And I learned how to work around the damage or how to include the damage into the garment.
Mm, I love that. I love that whole aspect. It's very similar to kind of how I started in terms of like, this is a thing I could just create. Like all I have to do is these lines and put them together. And I love how you just created different patterns with the patterns that already existed with
Thank you.
limited knowledge. And at the time, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
no, but see, it was like I instinctually knew how to do it.
that's
So it
so
was
great.
just a gift that I already had. And it was weird because that's all it was. I didn't have any formal knowledge until I actually, outside of working with Miss James when she showed me how to use the sewing machine,
Mhm.
I went to college. I went to Pratt fashion design department just to get the terminology so I could
Right.
operate in the fashion industry. So
So
once
when did
we,
you decide that that was the route that you were going to take to do fashion?
when I saw the cover of Life, I think it was, magazine,
Okay.
and they had the Black designer, Scott Berry, Stephen Burrows, and Willie Smith.
Wow.
And I said, that's what I am as a fashion designer. Because before then I was already sewing, but I just couldn't accept that whole title of being a seamstress or a
Mhm.
tailor or a seamster. Some people would try to call it to make it
Yeah.
masculine. I mean, all of that just sounds like, so I never really bought into it like, oh, yes, that's what I am. I just would be like, try to be pleasant and be like, okay, thank you. But in my
Right.
mind, it never stuck until I saw that magazine cover. And then I was like, that's what I am as a Black designer. Not
Wow.
that's what I want to be, but that's what I was.
That's amazing. That is the power of representation right there. Wow, that is amazing. So I should get some former training. And you went to Pratt.
I
So
went to
there
Pratt
you
to,
learned
yeah, to get some
all
formal
the
training in various things. Now, Pratt School was about draping more than pattern making, and I'd always worked from cutting out a pattern and then kind of manipulating it to the look I want. So it actually worked good for me in that environment. I already knew how to sew,
yeah.
and once I just learned little things, I was just off and running, which was a good thing and a bad thing, because then my professor saw that I knew things, so he gave me more work than a couple of us more work than the rest of the students, because in his mind, he's like, you had idle hands, that was a problem.
Yeah.
So, but
I
then it was
love
a
that.
challenge, which at the end of the day, I like a challenge. So it all worked out at the end of the day.
Well, great. I mean, eventually, of course, it worked out because it gave you the confidence to eventually start your own line and open up a boutique. So how was that in terms of from school to I have the confidence to do this myself? What was that transition like?
Um, I was already sewing for people, mostly women, oddly enough. I had a bad incident with a client and clothing and following her direction instead of doing what I should have known was right, and got stuck with a really big bill, which were the clothing she never purchased. And I moved away from women's wear altogether and moved directly to menswear. That was the first thing. Then from that, I was already selling clothes to a lot of dancers at Avon Ailey, Joffrey Ballet, what was the other one? Dance Theater of Harlem. So I started making clothing to have available because you would get these calls out of nowhere, and it would be like, well, I have a couple of things on the rack, so you could come see. If it was enough time, we could make something. And that's how I kind of started. This was probably the end of junior year, or the summer, of junior year is when it started. And then from there, I had a business already, and then I moved to the East Village and lived there for a while. Then moved back to Brooklyn. Was selling to clients. That's what it was. I kept selling to clients and with a mail order catalog, and people started ordering. And then I wanted a brick and mortar, and the brick and mortar, I couldn't afford New York. So from the mail order catalog business I created, plus all of the like fan mail you would get and inquiries you would get, and that was before social media. So this was either fax, phone number, answering service, answering machine, got those messages, and then you develop a database. And then we started figuring out, okay, well, where could we open a boutique other than New York? And I didn't even look at Queens or anything. I just saw who bought the most, and DC was up in the top 5. So I thought, well, I have a relationship with DC, having been there all these years back and forth. Let me go check that out. And after some time, it worked out. And then I ended up getting a spot that was affordable. And the build out was not necessary because the owner built it out to my specs, which most of it I liked how he did it anyway, because it was kind of Soho looking. Anyway, in Soho is where I always went window shopping for boutiques. And one day I want a boutique like this, and one day I want a boutique like that. So, it was the kind of feeling I got when I looked in the window of this particular retail space that was in DC. I could see it when I looked in the window. So I rented the spot and it was open for, like I said, 9.5 years.
Wow.
And then and that's how it went. Then I opened the shop in DC, and I was just commuting back and forth for a while. And then eventually I just moved to DC full time.
Wow, that is amazing. There's so many like little bits of like genius that you just mentioned. So you had a mail order catalog, which is amazing at the time. I feel like only the biggest names did that, like bigger entities that had access to people. How did you know who to send the mails to? How did you market that? Was it just that you had
from all I'm sorry. From the response we would receive from inquiries about the clothes that were in the magazines, all the press we got, we usually got a response. So we started developing a database of names and addresses and phone numbers, pre-email. So everything was addressed. And then from that, like I said, we decided DC would be a good place to open the shop.
Right.
So we could see how many people are actually buying. So I just took a chance on this will work. I did do a couple of pre-things though in DC prior to cementing that as the location a couple of years prior to. I would come down during certain holidays, bring clothing.
Yeah, and see.
Some of these guys were coming to New York to my studio in Brooklyn to shop with me anyway. So then I would let them know I'd be in DC and I'd be at my friend's home, because my friends were like, oh, yeah, sure. Just when you come, bring some clothes, bring a rack, just bring whatever you want to bring. And we usually drove anyway.
Yeah.
So it worked out pretty great at the time. And it took me a couple of holidays in a row, and I was making like $5 and $6 grand. I was like, wait a minute. There's something to this. So, for a weekend, granted, it was like a 3-4 day weekend, but even still, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At night, midnight, It may be in the afternoon, maybe first thing in the morning. Whoever came through would know. I would have set times for my customers to come through. Like I would hold 2 days, let's say, as a cocktail reception type of thing. And then they would come through and drinks would be available and you shop. But most people came to shop. They could care less about drinks and all that other stuff. They were very serious about, because everything was one of a kind or limited edition, or some things were in small, some things were in medium, some things were in large. Mostly whichever size bought the most, it would be a bulk of that. And then it would be other size that submitted till those sectors would grow.
I love that.
Extra large became a big thing. I would promise the guys next time I come back, I would definitely have plenty of size, and I would have just as much probably in their sizes too. And it would just be like that. So eventually, a couple of those, then some friends of mine hosted me for a fashion show. They had actually went to art gallery situation, sale, preview thing in someone's home, and they thought, we should do that for Shaka. And I was able to meet their friends and professional men and all of that. So all of that led up to DC being the spot, and then we just marketed directly to those people. I was opening a shop, and with some luck and some good style, they just came through, was like, yeah, we want to get your stuff.
I love that. I love that. So you definitely knew how to establish this. And I love the research that you did before making this big risk and a move. It was almost a sure thing at that point. But how has the e-commerce space changed with the brick and mortar space through the last couple decades?
Well, since I didn't have a brick and mortar space, the e-commerce space for me was a win.
Yeah.
Because it was a way to still meet your customer base. While it wasn't my target market that I already had established, it was a newer market. A lot of the people who hadn't seen me or hadn't really contacted me since I moved everything from Brooklyn to DC, they were able to get to it closer. And for them, so long as the fit was the same, it was much easier to order. Now the fit did change, but having had those as customers, I was able to let them know, this is how it fits now, this is what's that, this is whatever. And then if it was more like they wanted specific things from previous collections that they remember, I would just remake those or have them remade.
I love that. So you were still able to cater to your customer while expanding new customers with it.
Yeah, because once I opened the brick and mortar, I did have some customers that I was able to service customers from all over, because everyone came to DC at some point. So the people from California, the people from Chicago, Canada, Miami, whoever, once they came to DC, they could come to my shop. And I, kept the Shaka King vibe going up in there. The catalog, again, helped me. For the catalog, it was a program. So when I had the catalog, it was shirts, so you could order in your size. I had a company that I was working with for production in New York. I always ordered multiples of them, so it was just a matter of filling it out. I tried to use that idea when I first opened the shop in DC. They did shop a lot, but one customer said one time, your clothes have changed. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, since you opened in DC, I mean, they are great, because he had like 2 bags of clothes, but he said they're great, but they just seem a little different, And he was absolutely right. Once I opened in DC, when I was planning it out, I thought they were more conservative. There were only 1 or 2 people who bought the real funky, let's say, stuff. So to me, in my mind, it was better to stock it with the stuff I felt that was safer. Multiples more of the things I knew was safer as opposed to the crazy stuff. And this was probably 6 months into me being open.
Wow.
I think about 6 months into me being open, because I opened in the middle of the year. So this was like January, February the following year. And I was like, you know what? He's right. I have put the brakes on, and I do like what I'm doing, but I need to put more Brooklyn Shaka King up in here. And then that's what I did. And it worked out.
That is a great thing to just think about, just because it is one of those things that you often think like the safer route is going to, yield you the best result. And it's good to think of your customer. But the thing that they liked about you in the first place was that you weren't like everyone else. So that's good that you were able to see that and change it, but also give them, what they love about your designs and you.
Well, the blueprint for me, I always just read everything in the all fashion, 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 fashion,
Mhm.
the fashion news, daily, DNR, Women's Wear Daily, W, and they constantly talk about all these things. And the documentaries of this designer, or Saint Laurent, or Dior, or whoever,
Yeah.
and you see how they move and how they operate and how they consider it. Now, yes, sometimes they have a big machine
Mhm.
behind them. So what we see is the frivolousness of, 1,000 yards of fabric for hundreds of dollars and 75 million pairs of shoes laid out to choose
Yeah.
from. But when you see their story, they also started. And these are the things they ran into. So it was simpler not to run into those same problems. If you could avoid them, just work a solution out now and anticipate the problem.
I
Then if you
love.
anticipated the problem, then you could head it off if it came up. So it made no sense just to stock the store with whatever I only like. If guys
Yeah.
came and said, do you have socks? Do you have hats? Do you have this? Do you have that? I lived in New York. There were wholesalers all over the place. So
Right.
I would go and buy certain items that complemented the clothing so that the shop would also be a one-stop shop.
I love that. And those are just again more nuggets. You said a couple things in there. One being that you learn from other people's mistakes so you didn't have to make the same ones, and you learn from their successes so that you could repeat those successes. But then two, just the fact that like not everything has to be yours. Like you can complement it so that it makes it easier for your customer. And I
Right.
love that you recognize that. And obviously, that's a tribute to your success in this game.
Thank
Um,
you.
so thank you for those gems. But I also would love to hear, like, are there any moments that you took, any risks that you took that you kind of not necessarily wish you hadn't, but you were um, not as happy with the outcome with?
Yes. One was I went to Henri Bendel's designer open call. They liked a bunch of stuff. They ordered a bunch of stuff. They made me change some of the things.
Hmm.
And I jumped in with my money and did all of that. And then and this was like 6 months out. And then a
Okay.
couple of months before, they canceled something. And then they wanted uh, me to remove silver off of the jackets, only to turn around and a month before it was going, or weeks before it was going in the store, want the silver back on because silver was all over Europe at that point.
Ah.
So I regretted that I was trying to play that game when I was really such a small potato. But I
Hmm.
hadn't anticipated it would be like that, and I hadn't really read those kind of stories. And I thought these people were really true about saying, "Yes, we're going to bring you in," because you think, "Okay, this is my moment; it's going to happen."
Yeah.
So I kind of regretted even going, but I guess I had needed the experience because then when opportunities to be in other boutiques popped up, I was able to say, okay, this is how we need to do it. This is what I need in advance. This is what we're going to need signed. This is what we're going to need. Just yes. If you can do this, then we can have a deal. And there
Yeah.
were smaller boutiques in East Village and in Soho, but that was fine. That was good enough for me because I was always a home-based business, and I got that from reading articles in British Vogue, British Elle. It was so many
Yeah.
designers who worked from their home. I was like, oh, well, why can't we do that over here? Like the editors from America would trump through cobblestones and reading those stories too about the path was this way and it was falling
Yeah.
apart and it was dilapidated building, da 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 da. The inside was the most gorgeous, so it was just like they lived for that experience. And somehow when you came to America, you had to be on the avenue
Mm.
with this huge operation, whether or
Right.
not you could afford it or not, just on the chance they may come in, see something, like something, say something. If they
Yeah.
didn't do any of those, then you were right where you started. In this
Wow.
expensive place, trying to make ends meet. But of course, the industry was dictating it has to be this way, it has to be that way. So you
Hmm.
kind of follow that. I kind of heard that, but always felt like, but does that really pertain to me?
Right. That.
Because that's not my reality. So why don't I take that blueprint and work within the parameters of what I have and offer it the same way and see what we can do with that.
That. Wow. That is amazing. I love hearing both sides of that, how it did not work out and how you again, took more history from the past and and understood and like kind of did a research analysis of what is it that you can do for yourself, but what is it that the industry is accepting, and what is that the industry can newly accept in where you live. I love that aspect of how you approached your business. So with that, and with all the changes in the last couple decades of you transitioning through different ways of shopping and the industry changing, how is this time in COVID, how has that changed, and how has it affected your business?
Well, it hasn't really kind of affected my business.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the demand is a bit greater, and but now I have a problem because I can't get smaller production companies to do stuff because very few of them are open, and then they're already overrun with orders.
Yes.
Or trying to make it work, because they've had a lot of issues themselves. When COVID hit, though, I actually stumbled upon doing masks through kind of like a dare. And then my godson was in town. He actually put one on and posted it on his Instagram and tagged me in it. And then the next morning, my DM on Facebook and Instagram was like, well, I want 6, I want 4, I want 10. And what are the prices? So when I told him the price, I figured, okay, well, I'll lose some sales at this point. And it was like, okay, great, I want 10. My first couple of orders were 10 or 6 or 8. And then there was a 15 from California. And I just made them and sold them, and I would just make whatever I wanted. I would photograph them, and this would be available. I would write, this is gonna be, send some kind of message on social media, write something about it would be available. At first, the demand was so great that it was just send me 10 or whatever, or if any of them have pink or blue, throw them in with the 10 order. Like, it was pretty much what I wanted to them. And in some cases, knowing them, because there were some editors and fashion editors and stylists and stuff from New York, knowing them, I kind of always figured, oh, I think he or she would like these colors. And so I would create that, and that would just help because it would fit in with their aesthetic too, and but their existing wardrobe probably. So that was strong for a while.
Yeah, for a couple
holidays like that. Yeah, so it pretty much started the end of March, April, June, July, August, September, I think is when it started to taper off to like sensible numbers, if you will, 3 or 4 or 2. And then I had made matching bucket hats for a customer and posted that. And then that was a whole nother snowball because everybody already had masks. Were like, I want hats to match these masks and So, and the hats were reversible, so I could do one side to match one
and then flip it over. I love that.
Side to match another one.
So with the transition from, the world opening up, how are you transitioning now with that?
Well, so I was still stuck with I haven't done any pop-ups though.
Okay.
At all. I've only been doing online sales, direct custom orders, and or whatever's posted on social media.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to get the little engine to get to creating a vast amount of stuff for pop-up, but that isn't really working. So I'm gonna have to like just stop for like a couple of weeks because like I have this really big celebrity I got to make all these clothes for because he's going back on tour. And at the same time, I'll be able to I'm going to just start pumping out as much as possible and then try to get ready for something in the fall. I won't be able to do the summer, I don't think, unless it's going to be the end of the summer, maybe. But then I wouldn't want to do a bunch of clothing just for the summer, but still, because then it's the end of the season, you're ready to shop again for the season to come.
For fall. So do you have someone that helps you with your Instagram and your internet, or like, do you have a team that rallies around you? And if so, how are you selecting this team? And if not, how are you doing this?
Well, I am doing it all myself at the moment.
Wow.
And that was after business was slowing down and there wasn't a need for the same amount of people. I have tried different interns to work with me, but honestly, people just don't have a work ethic and they're not responsible enough. They're so busy being bombarded with their own everything that they forget they're actually working towards something or for someone or
Right.
both of those things for someone who can help you. And so it becomes more of a fight, not a fight, but for me, I get annoyed because by the time I have to keep showing you over and over again, I can just do it myself. So I just kind of plan on my day. Social media just happens when it can happen, which I do get to it every day, but it may be in the morning, it may be mid-afternoon. Sometimes it just may not be at all, depending on what I'm working on. As far as the orders, well, it's this way. If I have to make the clothes for people to see them first, to buy them, then if I can just take the order, we've cut out that whole middleman section.
Yeah.
So easy enough to say, I want this, these are the prices, great, I'll take them, send me whatever. It's a no-brainer in a way for me.
Right.
And I can make as much as I can make and handle my bills, but I have a customer base that I don't and can't abandon and won't abandon. So they keep them in my mind. So I try somewhat to, fulfill as much as I can when it comes to them calling in and asking for an order. I usually try to jump them to the head of the list and just, even if I miss sleep for a couple of days, just knock it out and get it to them in between other orders because I get it. So looking at it as a customer or me even being a fan of what I do, I understand how you would want it and how you're not hating if you don't get it, but it just makes them feel better. So if I can make them happy or smile and get them the look they need for whatever event they think is what is going to turn it out, then I try my best to make sure they get it.
I love it. And your service mindset, I'm sure, is again another testament to your success. So with that, and you of course are serving all these customers from all around and creating this, what is your routine? So you wake up in the morning, what is your daily, and then when do you go to sleep, and how are you juggling, family, friends, all of that?
So family and friends are handled primarily by phone.
Okay.
But I actually now take Sundays off. So with in my whole head, like I do nothing on Sundays, but whatever, that might be family, friends, chilling, cleaning up a little bit, or just really chilling. It's pretty much what it is. And that actually has worked for me. Wish I had done it earlier.
Yeah.
So when I wake up, the very first thing I actually do is have hot water with pink salt and lime and bladderwrack with sea moss, Irish sea moss and bladderwrack. And I have black seed oil. I take all that first thing first. Then I just get in a quiet space and just be quiet, no music, no TV, and as much of the outside that I can block out. And I keep the room dark. And I just sit there and just chill and just kind of whatever. And then I get up and brush my teeth and yoga, stretch, workout, whatever that's going to be. And then I jump into work. Sometimes I have to alter things I didn't get done the night before first. And then I still always have my sea moss and bladderwrack set up every time I wake up.
Wow.
That's just what I do first, regardless. And I usually am up around somewhere between 5 and 6.
Okay.
Every day, usually 5:30, but there are some 3 and 4s when I wake up. But now I'm trying to get a full 6 hours. So at least. And I work now still like 1. Well, I try to cut off at 1 at the most part. Then that means I have to wake up. If I'm still trying to get up at 5 or whatever, then I have to go at 10 or 11, which is rare. Unless I've really been at it all day, and that's pretty much the only thing I've done. And then I work. So work is pretty much my life. But my friends and family know that, and they don't make too much of it. And when friends do visit, I try to carve out some time for that. But if it's not the case, they're happy to sit in the studio and talk to me and joke around and watch cable and eat food, because I still cook. So they be ready for that part of it. So I'll keep cooking, and we're laughing.
There's other perks.
Yeah, it's good. So and at this point, it's been a lot of years of doing it this way. So I'm just so driven, I can't stop it. It's like every time I have too much time sitting around doing nothing, I feel like I'm not, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not abandoning Shaka King, like I'm not doing right by Shaka King menswear.
I love that. I love it.
And that's my friend.
Very
so
similar in that way.
Yeah, that's
so
my friend.
Are there any
Are
there any books or apps or I know you mentioned yoga, but or any other practices that you have that help you improve?
Well, I do read Acts of Faith every day.
Okay.
And I started reading Acts of Faith because I grew up in the church, but controlled religion at some point just was like, okay, yeah, I mean, organized religion. Y'all and control, y'all can't possibly really think this is all of this. So I am spiritual, and I stumbled on Acts of Faith. Maybe I saw her talking about it or something, but I got it. And it answers the questions because it has you asking questions to yourself, your responsibility to yourself. If you're responsible to yourself, then you can start becoming more responsible to your community and those around you. And I found more answers in that than just reading a Bible verse and trying to decipher what ye, thee, we, me, all that means in some cases. You know, it was kind of not clear. So Acts of Faith for me, and nothing against religion. I grew up in the
but
church
that's
and
just what
all of that.
that's what works for you.
Yeah, spirituality is my take on it, and that's what works for me. So that clears it up. You know, that's probably my only one thing that I would do daily that way. But the silence works a lot for me. Just every day, know nothing for 15, 30 minutes, 40. Somehow there's something that clicks and said, I'm good, and then I'll say a little prayer, and then I'll move on.
I love that. I'm trying to work on being good in my quiet spaces and not, you know, get work done when I decide now this is the time for me to be quiet. I love how you explain that. So, what are you the most proud of in people and humanity? What are you proud of?
Okay. So I think I really wanted to think about that. So for me, for people, I
Okay.
am very much happy that they have perseverance during all of the hardship, the hate, the racism. Like, you keep moving on. So that's
Okay.
what I like in people.
Mm-hmm.
Humanity, on the other hand, I think it really is still trying to live up to its definition. I really do. I think of treating everyone with kindness, that just isn't happening. And I know some of it's because of your beliefs, and some of it's because you were raised a certain way, and some of it's because you're not communicating properly and people are misreading what you're saying. But if there was way more kindness, then humanity would, to me, be in a better place. Now, I see what happened during COVID and with George Floyd and all of the protests and the outrage that came from that. And so it put humanity forward. And I think the people that were together, that joined together, have always been on that page. But there was a whole lot of other people that went a whole nother direction, who saw it a whole different way, who put a whole different spin on it, who went down and became an agitator to make sure their lie was the truth. I think those are the people we're talking about. You know, the ones who just don't feel connected. And it's all racist. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, it's all racist. Yes, it's a group in particular that is focused on being that way only. But outside of that, I just see it in all areas. And I think for me, that's it. That humanity needs to live up to its definition. So I'm holding out for it because of people and their own drive
and their way of persevering.
I think that is close to, that's the humanity I see now, is in those people. But those people are also dealing with hard times and unnecessariness. We, the people, are living through hard times and a bunch of unnecessariness. And that's where it's the problem.
So with that, in knowing that humanity is working on living up to their to their name and our name, but seeing that people have perseverance and being proud of that aspect of it, what are you proud of in yourself, and what you've accomplished, or who you've become?
Well, I think I'm most proud of the fact that I've stayed true to the core values that was instilled in me when I was a kid. So I do still, even though you run into funky attitudes and racism and unnecessariness, I still don't walk around saying I want to kill you, I hate you, and keep
Yeah.
that anger thing. I just go, poor person. I mean, yes, you're mad at first, you know, because come on now, I've been dealing
It's
with this
hard
thing
to not be.
40,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, since I was 15. We're talking almost 50 plus years. I mean, and you don't see a change. It's the same kind of energy. And you're supposed to think, oh, well, there is going to be a change that's coming. If you 50 plus years and it still hasn't happened, something is moving way, way, way too slow. And time isn't moving slow. So it has to be the people who are in the power to change it that are moving too slow. And if they're moving this slow, they don't want to change.
And that's,
It
and
benefits
that
them.
is, that is very true. I mean, it's hard to want to change because it's not comfortable.
But
Um,
I again, in me, I'm proud that I continue to keep hope alive and
yeah,
continue to move in a space that, regardless of how you're going to be, this is who I am, and I'm going to still be kind and nice and gentle when possible,
that's good.
and but still direct and standing my ground because that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to just shy away from. I can't shy away from it. I've had too many incidents come up that say, "Oh, okay, well, you've lost, so you might as well throw in the towel." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I go through a moment, sometimes hours, sometimes days, feeling down
Yeah.
about it, and then there's always a voice that comes up and says, "Okay, so now that's what you're going to do. You're just going to sit around for the rest of your life, or you're going to get back in this fight." And I'm right back in
Keep
it.
getting back in, and
And,
that is,
and don't try to take it is personal the way people come at you, but you cannot take it personal all the time if you're trying to move in this world because people are ignorant and stupid. You know, it's just they are. And I don't know if it's by choice or by design, but they are. And so you'll stay mad, is my point. So I have to move beyond that. So then
yeah,
that's when friends come in good because then you call them all the time and be like, can you believe this? I can't believe this. And they'll be like, yeah, but you know, da 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 da. Or
exactly.
yeah, but don't let it ruin your day. You know, and those things that you know, but it's good to hear them as a reinforcement to kind of, for me,
Yes,
take me back to a place of just focusing on work and fashion.
right. I love that. I love how you describe that. And yes, the importance of friends and family to help you remind yourself of who they are and who you are in these situations and how much you can persevere and all of the craziness because yeah, people are stupid. I love that you said you can't take, even though it might be personal, you can't take it personally. And mainly because yeah, they have their own personal, you know, backgrounds that have made them to that point to even think that they need to be negative towards you in any way, shape, or form. So I love how you sum that up. So I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions, and possibly the most important. But if you were a shoe, which shoe would you be and why?
Let me ask you a question. So when you say shoe, are you also talking about sneakers and this out
Any,
whole footwear category? Okay,
any,
so for me, then I would be a sneaker. And the
okay.
reason I would be a sneaker is because it's functional and it's fashionable.
I love it. I love it. I love that answer. And I can see it, the function, the fashion.
And you
It's
could dress it up or
so good.
down.
What was that?
And you could dress it up or down.
And you really can. It's functional in many situations. It's usable, and they can look amazing. And I do see that in your clothing. They're functional. They're cute. I love even just your white shirts and how interesting they are. Your jackets and the cuts and everything is just so clean and very chic. So I see why you got that name, and a sneaker can be chic, and I love that. So that being said, I really appreciate you joining me today and joining us today with the Black Design Collective. Your story has been very interesting. I love your ode to history and how you use it for the future, and the fact that you are you reverence history, but also very much progressive in technology in the future today. So thank you for sharing us with your knowledge, and I hope that you enjoy your day, and I wish you the best.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you guys reached out to me and thank you for having me.
Yeah, have a nice day.
You too. Have a nice one.